She's a reporter. I just never said it. Hello dears, Natalie Locke here, and today's video is actually pretty special because I'm collaborating with Chandra Arthur. Don't worry, she's in the cards right here. Her and I are posting 2 videos at the exact same time because we traded our stories writing them. We took prompt number 20 out of Write the Story, where we have a writing prompt plus 10 words to include in that prompt and about 400 words worth of space to include here. And that prompt is what we use to write our story with. I created something, she created something magical. It is great. So how it's gonna work, if you wanna join us on writing, after I give you the prompt, you can pause the video, write your own story, or you can watch how Chandra and I did it. I will give you my outline, as I always do, after the prompt. But to hear my story, you got to go over to Chandra's channel to hear her read it and then critique it. If you're here on my channel, I will read Chandra's story and I will critique it as well. Also, here's kind of cool. Chandra and I will be writing in the comments on each other's videos to answer any questions, because if you've ever seen any of our flash fiction lives, you know we feed off each other. So stay tuned for that. Let's go ahead and give the prompt. A journalist crosses a line. The words to include are defamation, stroke, reporter, truck, weasel, supermarket, encyclopedia, contemplate, classify, and clutch. Now for my outline, the first thing that got to me was stroke. And I didn't want to use it in the phallic sense. And the only other way I could think to use it was in regards to golf strokes. I didn't want to set this at a golf course or anywhere, but I did think of the cliche, the stroke of midnight. So that's where I kicked off the outline. From there, I saw reporter and truck. I knew I was going to write about a reporter, and truck, I was like, let's have a woman drive a truck. Let's kind of have this, like, you know, those trucks, like the big elevated ones where you almost got to get a running start to get into it. That was the truck I was picturing. I was like, let's have a big truck. And that's where I started picturing where this was going. And then weasel, I was like, let's have the person who drove the truck, who turned out to be a woman, let's have her weasel out of the truck. And hopefully that works. Weasel usually is a negative connotation, but I was trying to think of it as like, you're trying to wiggle out of the truck and it's really high, especially if she's in heels and stuff. Like, I was like, I think weasel could work there. Supermarket is where she parked the truck. Encyclopedia, that was actually a difficult one for me until I came to the end of my story and I realized what was going to happen. Contemplate. So this one was kind of difficult. So after the woman parks the truck and starts walking, I was like, well, what is she contemplating? At first I was like, and she contemplates as she walks. And I was like, well, I need to give her something to contemplate. So I gave her an entire like inner monologue, which is surprising that I gave her that and still kept this at like 255 words. But I gave her an entire inner monologue, and that I feel really helped the situation, because it's one thing to say she contemplated, but it's another thing to actually cover it. So the last 2 words, classify and clutch. Classify was going to be a situation of where this woman gets a phone call and she's asking the officer on the other line, hey, how would you classify this? Because she's getting a phone call about a murder. And he answers the question. The clutch, I was thinking that I was going to use it in the handbag sense. And defamation, I got a little creative on how to use that one. It was a little bit of a struggle for me, but I feel that I did good with that one. And I don't want to over explain it because I'd rather hear if Chandra got that when she read the story, as well as yourself when you listen to it. We'll see. I might have to defend myself in her comments. The one word I do not have is reporter. I'm writing about a reporter. It's obvious she's a reporter. because the person that gives her a phone call is like, hey, you can have the first officer on scene interview if you get here in 10 minutes. Like, she's a reporter. I just never said it. You know what? I realize it's because I edited this a little bit where the guy says, you're the first reporter I called, and I ended up cutting that line. And I should have kept it. So there's my outline. And only one thing changed because I didn't even have it in the outline, but I also didn't have it in the story. So technically 10 out of 10 stayed the same. I'll get that. Now is the time. If you want to listen to my story, go over to Chandra's channel. I got the video in the cards here. So you can go over and listen to that story. Now, if you're here, let me read you Chandra's story. But you're gonna see a video of me in the background writing my story. The questions many are asking tonight: has a journalist crossed the line? Melissa Vargas had been asking that question on the news channel 9 like she didn't even know the man. Witnesses say he climbed into the open window of the overturned semi-truck using the undercarriage as a ladder. He entered through the shattered driver's side window. The camera was trained on a well-groomed man sitting behind the defendant's table in the courtroom. All eyes were on him. Mr. Aiden Vargas has already levied a defamation case against the city, claiming he was attempting to render aid. Witnesses say that is not the case. Aiden stared directly into the camera, like he knew I was watching. The truck driver, Randy Homer, suffered a stroke and was pronounced dead at the scene. Both his wife and the city claimed that Mr. Vargas's attempt to render aid cost the descendant his life, as authorities spent the next hour trying to free Mr. Vargas from the overturned vehicle. Behind me, you can see the steep embankment where the truck was hanging over the rocky ravine. I was lucky there had been an audience. There were plenty of people who had finished their shopping and were loading up their cars in the parking lot of the supermarket across the street. They had stopped to watch the truck careening through the intersection. They watched long enough to see a thin man weasel his way into the window of the cab and hear his frantic shrieks when he landed on the passenger side window and nearly fell through. I wonder if he ever stopped to contemplate the consequences of his actions. Most people wouldn't classify him as a frat boy, but they didn't know him like I did. I tapped my cigarette over the ashtray and lay back on the too soft hotel pillow, my eyes focused on the television. It was a somber day as the victim's wife was seen weeping in court. Melissa Vargas said the words in an oddly businesslike tone, the way all reporters do. Aiden looked bored, like he'd been reading the encyclopedia. I tapped my cigarette, once more letting the ash fall into the tray below, then stubbed it out as I blew out smoke between my smiling lips. I may have had a hand in everything else, but Aiden, his own pride would be his downfall. Chandra, if you're watching, love this story. Love it so much. The questions that came about, and my assumptions, is that Aiden, Melissa, and the main character, all three know each other somehow. Like, they went to school together or something, because the comment of Melissa Vargas had been asking the question on the news channel 9 like she didn't even know the man when she's talking about Aiden. And the narrator is saying most people wouldn't describe him as a frat boy, but they don't know him like I did. So Melissa and narrator know Aiden, is my assumption. But then I think the narrator had a situation where they caused the accident, or they were trying to set up Aiden. But I think they were just trying to set up Aiden, but it turned out that Aiden kind of ended up setting up himself because of his own pride. Like, Aiden knows he didn't do anything, so therefore he's like almost too prideful, and it's like, we need to bring him down a few notches. So maybe that's the case. Like, there's a few different ways this can go. Something that I think could help this story is the transition of watching a newscast. There's the line of, the camera was trained on a well-groomed man sitting behind the defendant's table in the courtroom. I think what it would be good to say is maybe call it background footage or B-roll or something if the person is actually in the television market. They would call it B-roll. I think that would kind of help, because the way I see it is that this is an entire news segment. And so they probably have the person either standing in front of the courthouse with the microphone pre-recorded, going, today it happened in court, and then they show shots from the courtroom. And then it comes back to the person standing in front of the courthouse, wrapping the entire block up. I just feel like it could have been a little clearer that it was already recorded, already happened, because at this point, when the camera was trained on the well-groomed man sitting behind the defendant's table, I thought we were in a courtroom or something, or maybe outside the courtroom and this person was watching on their phone. Like, I was still trying to figure out if it was live, what was happening. And it wasn't until the end, which could have been the purpose, that I was put in my place on my assumptions and realized that this person's just laying in bed watching the news. Something that stood out to me, though, and I just had an idea, is that I just saw the line again of, I was lucky there had been an audience. There was plenty of people who had finished their shopping, and they had stopped to watch the truck careening through the intersection. Was this the truck driver? Possibly. But then no, they said the descendant was pronounced dead on the scene. Like, they suffered a stroke. So they need a body to discern that. Because that was a thought for a second, that maybe the driver was trying to fake their own death. And poor Aiden got blamed for it. I don't know. That would be a cool story. Back to this. So I already explained what I felt could use some work. And it was just because it had me jump around. I was still trying to get my grasp. And we do jump around a lot with this, but I do like the jumping around. It kind of puts multiple pictures and scenes in my head instead of just one back and forth situation. But that is the only critique I have, honestly, is to just put some of the journalist lingo or convey that this person, our narrator, is watching on a TV. But if your point was to make me confused for a little bit and then bring me back and answer my questions at the end, then you succeeded. The lines that I like the most are the ones that I want answers for. The big questions, the overarching question, which is, who is our narrator? What is their connection with Melissa and Aiden? Because there's the line, one of my favorites, Aiden stared directly into the camera like he knew I was watching. And I like that. When creating a little news segment, the person editing this didn't plan for this look, but the person watching the clip feels that it's targeted directly at them. And I find that interesting, because it's definitely more of a reflection on the narrator than a reflection on Aiden. I just saw another thing that stood out to me of ways to change this up so it's not too echoey. But tapping the cigarette happened a few times. I think one of those, tapping the cigarette, could change to, I flicked the ashes off. I like this story because the thing that's great about this story is that we're introduced with two characters and a third as the narrator, but we don't know the narrator's the character until we see the line, Aiden stared directly into the camera like he knew I was watching, which is also why that is my other favorite line, is because that's when we get the first I, and we know the narrator now. It's like we see the narrator a little bit. And that's what I really liked about this story. So, really much to change at all. I got questions. I want this story fleshed out more to answer my questions. But other than that, I got nothing. It was like happy to glad changes. I don't know. So, please support my friend Chandra. Go over to her channel, watch her video, watch her many other videos. She's got great videos, but she's also got the video where she even reads my story and critiques it for all of you. Hope you enjoyed this writing prompt, and I hope you enjoy your day, your week, your month, and your year.